You're listening to Science and Spirituality with Deepak Chopra.
Hello, my friends. This is Deepak Chopra, and I have the distinct honor today to be speaking with the author of this amazing book, Anchored: How to Benefit Your Nervous System Using Polyvagal Theory. And the author is Deb Dana. The foreword is by Stephen Porges, whom I've met and I'm a big fan of. But I have to say, this book actually puts everything together in a way I've never seen before. So it's a great privilege to be talking to you, Deb.
It is lovely to be here and talk with you about Anchored. It was a joy to write, and it's lovely that it's finding its way out into the world and taking Steve's work to everyday people.
Yes. So let's start from the beginning a little bit, because you used the word anchored in a very specific way. Why the title, Anchored?
It's fascinating because when I teach, people are always looking for words: grounded, centered, present. And I have always used anchored. As I say in the book, I grew up in Maine. I grew up around the water, on the water. And an anchor is a vital piece of equipment on a boat because it holds us in place safely, but it allows us to move around that space. So it's not this rigidity. And I think when we're talking about the nervous system, anytime we talk about something that's rigid, we move out of well-being. So an anchor allows us to do this beautiful movement around being held in place. And so for me, it just feels as though anchored is where I want to be, anchored in regulation, anchored in connection with room to move around that space.
So Deb, I'm a physician. I went to medical school in 1964. I graduated in 1969. I came to the United States in 1970. Did my internship in New Jersey, then went on to Boston, residency, neuroendocrinology, and now, looking at all this amazing stuff. In my training in medical school, we always talked about the sympathetic nervous system. We talked about, fight, flight, and we talked about inflammatory responses as a result of sympathetic overdrive. The only little bit I knew about the vagus nerve when as a student, or even afterwards, was a little bit about, vasovagal syncope as something that happened to people. And there wasn't much literature about vagus. Then, of course, I met yoga teachers. I started to work with Eddie Stern. I met Stephen Porges, and now your work. Tell our audience exactly what the vagus nerve is, and what does it do? How many branches does it have? Because I have some interesting anecdotes to share with you, but tell our audience right now, what is the vagus nerve? Are there two of them? And do they innervate every organ in the body? And you talk about three branches of the vagus nerve: the ventral, the dorsal, and ventral dorsal. Talk about that.
Yeah, I would love to. So the vagus is the major part of the parasympathetic nervous system. So we have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, which is what you learned about in medical school, and it's still what medical students are learning. They're not really learning what Steve has brought to us, that the vagus nerve is divided into ventral and dorsal. which is so important for us to understand. So that's where we get the three branches. We get ventral and dorsal for the parasympathetic, and then we get the sympathetic fight and flight. And so what I think we've understood now is there is this fight flight response, which is the sympathetic nervous system, and all trauma survivors, all humans understand that fight flight. Cortisol, adrenaline flood us and we can feel it. And then we have this dorsal vagal system, which in its survival response takes us into, in its furthest response, that vasovagal syncope that you learned about, the fainting. But all of the different nuanced ways that dorsal comes to life inside us take us into a bit of fogginess or numbness, or not really as present as I was, or just going through the motions but don't have energy to be here, or collapsed, disconnected. Those are all the flavors of a dorsal survival response. When dorsal is doing its everyday function, when doing what it's supposed to do to just keep us healthy, it runs our digestion, right? So healthy digestion is a function of a dorsal vagal response that does not go to survival, just goes to homeostasis. And then we have ventral, and ventral is this amazing part of the vagus nerve. It's really from the diaphragm upward, whereas dorsal is diaphragm downward. So this beautiful ventral system, that is the mammalian system that allows you and me to do this right now, to be in connection, to communicate, to connect, to feel safe enough in the world, organized enough in my day to meet the moments with a bit of equanimity. Right. And so ventral is, what I call the essential ingredient for well-being. Right. Because without ventral, when ventral is not accessible to us, when the world feels too overwhelming and we can't feel anchored in ventral, we then go into sympathetic fight flight or dorsal collapse, shutdown, disconnect. We go to one of those survival responses because our nervous system very wisely takes us there, right? It's an adaptive response in the moment. And yet when we leave ventral, we lose the capacity to do this, to be open, engaged, curious, compassionate, connected. For our prefrontal cortex no longer works in a way that helps us problem solve or plan. And so we can begin to see how essential this ventral energy is to have activated and flowing in our system so that we can live our purpose. We can be passionate and purposeful and optimize how we are human.
So, I was going to share this anecdote and might as well share it now. About 10 years ago, I was in Aspen at the brain conference or something like that. And I got a call from a very important person who was the head of R&D for one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world. No need to name them right now. And so I had a private lunch. Actually, I was leaving earlier and he flew in on his private plane to meet me for lunch at the Little Nell. And he informed me that this major pharmaceutical company was now looking at electroceuticals. So I said, please tell me what you mean by that. So he said, well, what happened is that at that time, 10, 15 years ago, I don't remember exactly, I think it was 10 years ago, he said that the only condition for which a vagal electrical implant was approved was intractable epilepsy. And so they had been putting these implants in the vagus nerve and then stimulating them with electricity. And what they found was, the epilepsy was improving, but in many patients, other things were getting better. So they were getting, their hypertension was going away, their heart disease was reversing, many cases inflammation was going down, autoimmune illness was getting better. In many cases, their mood improved, etc., etc. So he said it seems like the vagus nerve has bidirectional traffic, and we think that the future is going to be electroceuticals instead of pharmaceuticals. So I said, yeah, that sounds very interesting. Why am I meeting you? He said, because apparently in the yogic literature, you have all the knowledge of the different branches of the vagus nerve, and that the yoga postures and the breathing techniques and the chanting all stimulate different parts of the vagus nerve. And so we were thinking maybe we could collaborate. I said, first of all, if I were you, I wouldn't be putting electrical implants. Maybe I put a magnet outside and use my iPhone to stimulate it without anything invasive. But, we can teach people breathing and yoga and vocalization and social interaction, and they should start getting better. And he said, yeah, that's true, but how do we make money? And I realized that, as a pharmaceutical company, public company, that's what he should be thinking of. Anyway, I never heard from him. I said, you can fund some research, this, that, the other. But then now time has gone by, and I recently met a Japanese woman, a Japanese American woman, and she came to me with a little device, which was about, the size of my ear pod, those ear pods that you use. And it has a little what do you call, sensor looking thing that stimulates very gently the auricular branch of the vagus nerve. So you could be doing anything, and I could be talking to you, and I have this device in my ear, and even as I do put that on, I can see on my phone, my HRV changing. So this guy didn't have the right idea, electroceuticals, but I'm certainly seeing now the future of what we might call digiceuticals, possibly. But what is happening when the vagus nerve is being stimulated? I'm told that the vagus nerve is like the vagabond nerve. That's where the word comes from. It influences eye movements, facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, facial expressions, gestures. But other than that, it also is self-regulating and bringing about homeostasis in almost every organ in the body. Is my understanding even slightly correct?
Yes, your understanding is lovely, and I was laughing about what'd you call it?
Digiceuticals.
I love it, digiceuticals. Okay, yeah, and what the lovely thing is that each of us already inside our biology have the capacity to become active operators of our nervous system. And so we can, yes, there probably will be things we put in our ears, things we wear, all this stuff, and we can do it ourselves, as as a yoga person. But as we know, people who don't go down that road, through our breath, through our movement, because the vagus nerve, impacts so many organs. And when you talked about the eyes, the face, the prosody, the head turn and tilt that we do, you just did this, and my nervous system said, oh, he's with me, I'm not alone, right? My nervous system said that. My brain, who knows what it did, but my nervous system felt joined. That's our biology at work, and we all have the capacity to activate that and use that for well-being on our own. But the beautiful thing about this vagal state is we can then use it to invite others into this place of welcome and well-being. So it's both a for myself and for others experience. And yes, when our ventral vagal system is overseeing our nervous system, then sympathetic runs in the background, helping to regulate our breath and heart rhythms, and dorsal brings nutrients to nourish us so we have healthy digestion. And what we've discovered and continue to discover is that as we help people find more anchors in ventral and able to stay there, all of their symptoms begin to reduce and many resolve, whether they're physical symptoms or psychological symptoms. And I think that is so amazing to know that sort of with the right support, the right connections, we can begin to reshape our own biology without needing something else, just reshape our own biology. And as our biology reshapes, as our state changes, the stories that we inhabit, the way we think about how the world works and our place in it, those organically change as well.
So I'm speaking right now to Deb Dana. The book is Anchored, How to Befriend Your Nervous System Using Polyvagal Theory. Some of the things I practice, one is something that the Buddhists do. They say, smile from your head to your toe and imagine that every part of your body is smiling. Your hair follicles, your nose, your teeth, your heart, and take a few deep breaths and then do some chanting. And you will have, and if you combine that with yoga, so smiling, chanting, or what you call toning, different yoga postures, deep breathing techniques. I've been taught a breathing technique where I can decrease my breath rate sometimes to 2 per minute, and my brain waves fall to less than 4, which is deep sleep. So you can achieve the metabolism of deep sleep while awake. All these things are possible. And then, in the end of the book, you talk very elegantly about exploring this gentle shaping, you say, but then caring for the nervous system, tuning in, taking in, tending to, then flexibility and resilience. And you talk about self-care, a continuum of resilience. Share a little bit what you mean by this beautiful diagram where you have 4 quadrants: relational, physical, spiritual, and mental. Mm-hmm. Then you also talk about 4 aspects of relationship. Would you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. And as you were talking about your practices where you can, lower your breath to 2 per minute and all of the things you can do, I'm sitting here in awe of that because I certainly can't do that. And I guess what I wanted to say also was that each nervous system finds its own way. Right. And that I think is the lovely, the gentle part of this, that if I can come to a breath pattern that brings me to this place of feeling safe, then mine is going to look different than yours. Right. And it's going to look different than the people around us. And I think that's lovely because each nervous system is shaped in its own way, is shaped from our life experience. And so when we look at that circle with the 4 quadrants, which is the self-care circle, I really created that because I wanted the people I was working with to understand that self-care isn't a set protocol, that self-care comes from connecting to your inner experience, to your nervous system, and finding what are the activities that bring me a sense of feeling that ventral anchor, feeling regulated, feeling hopeful, feeling passionate or purposeful. And so I divided it into those 4 quadrants, the physical, spiritual, relational, environmental, and to really begin to, inside the circle, to take some time and think, what are the things I'm doing right now that help me feel as though I am practicing self-care? What are the mental things that I do? And so one of my mental things is I love reading research, right? And so for me, reading research is a self-care practice. And for most of my friends, they think I'm crazy. So it would not go on their self-care circle, right? But it is for me. So go around the circle and put things inside the circle that are what you do now predictably, regularly. And then on the outside of the circle, the invitation is to put things that you're curious about exploring, right? Just what have you not ever tried? And you think, oh, I think this might bring me joy, or this might bring me ease. And on the physical quadrant of mine, and I may have put this in the book or it may have gotten edited out, but on the physical quadrant of mine, I have always longed to learn to tap dance. right? And so tap dancing is always stays on the outside. It has never made it to the inside of the circle, but there's something about it when I put it on there, it brings me a smile, and I think, oh, maybe this year, right? So, it's okay to have things that always stay on the outside. It's okay. And that, again, is, I think, the lovely flexibility of working through a nervous system way rather than the brain way. My brain would fill in that circle in a very different way. It would say, you should, and it would put shoulds all over the place. And shoulds are not ventral experiences. They're sympathetic drivenness, have to, right? So my brain would say, oh, you take tap dancing off. You're never going to do it. It's stupid to keep putting it on. Right. My nervous system gets great joy in it. And so I go to my nervous system to fill this out. And I think that's what I'm trying to help people do, is to listen beneath the brain story, because the brain has its own idea, right? And it kind of feels what's happening in the body, and then it makes up a story to make sense of it. So, my brain might feel this, this heart beating a little faster. And my brain might make up the story, you're going in the wrong direction, stop talking, right? Because it's trying to make sense of this feeling in my body. If I can anchor in ventral, the brain then has a very different story. It says, oh, you're feeling excited and having fun, right? So again, it's the state that the brain uses to make up the story. So the encouragement is to find ways to resource ventral, and it can be micro moments, which again is what we talk about, right? Micro moments. You don't have to be, a long experience in ventral is not needed. Micro moments. Every micro moment begins to accumulate, and your nervous system begins to look for more micro moments, and we begin to shape more in the direction of regulation. Right. And as that happens, the brain becomes more used to feeling that regulation, and it begins to create stories of possibility and hope.
Our essential experience of existence is just sensations and sense perceptions and images and feelings and thoughts. What we call mind, body, and the world are stories, really, based on how we interpret sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. So if we don't create a story and we are aware of experience as it happens without anticipation or regret, and also if we are aware of the choices as we're making them, something that people are calling metacognition, are we activating the ventral vagus?
Yes, because we don't have the capacity for metacognition unless we have enough ventral circulating in our system. Because when we're in a survival response, we can't have that capacity. So, and when we can simply sit in, what's my nervous system response? Am I drawn toward? Do I feel like I have to get away? Do I want to fight back, or do I just float away? If we stay with that and out of the story, it's a fascinating place to be. Right? Because what I like to think is our nervous system is always communicating with us, right? Always, micro moment to micro moment, we're getting information, but we don't know how to listen. So part of this work is learning how to turn toward my nervous system and listen, and what is it trying to tell me in this moment? What does it need me to know right now? Right? And so that's really the joy of this work. And then, in this moment, your nervous system and my nervous system are having a conversation, right? Our brains are as well, but our nervous systems are having a conversation. And if we drop below the level of this kind of awareness into this awareness for a moment, we can feel into that conversation, right? And that, I think, is the joy of connection.
And I was remembering many years ago being in the Serengeti in Africa. And, when you're out there in the wilderness, many times you'll see that a pride of lions and, and a pride or collection of other animals, including buffalo and deer, and they're all kind of there together, and they seem to be sitting there having a picnic, except when the predator, the lion, is hungry, then no one's around. And then the tiger, usually a female or the lioness, she goes on a hunt and there's no one around. And then, you see these giraffe or these buffalo or these deer running, and the lioness spots the weakest one. She goes for the weakest one, kills it, brings it back to her pride. They all have a meal. And then everybody's back to normal. They're all sitting there, the animals, the lion and the deer together, till the next round when he's hungry. In other words, there is no anticipation, there is no regret, there is just the spontaneity in the moment. And so the animal is not thinking about the future. It's not regretting the past, and yet it behaves totally appropriately in the present. And I was thinking to myself, we are a strange species. We imagine things that usually don't happen, and we regret things that we can't do anything about. So we never actually live life.
Right. Well, in our because one of the things as you were talking, I was thinking our nervous systems are not like those animals' nervous systems as you were describing it, because our nervous systems take in information and learn, so to speak, right? So if you're, if you had a moment of, going into fight with me, my nervous system would have a response. Not sure what it would do, but it would have a response. And then the next time, I saw you and we were together, my nervous system would remember that moment, and it would have a bit of unease, right? So that's really, I think where we get stuck, where we humans get stuck, because our nervous system learns from experience, and then a familiar cue from the past comes alive in the present, and we get taken right down that survival pathway. We have to be able to take a moment and use a bit of discernment, right? Which again is a ventral experience. Discernment emerges from ventral, and I have this discernment question that I use in this moment, in this place, with this person. Is this intensity of response needed, right? And if I can ask myself that, it brings me into this moment, and I can discern what's happening. Oh, my nervous system has a memory of, and it might not even be anything connected with you. It might be a word or a movement or a look that reminds my nervous system of someone from my past.
In this book, you also talk about various kinds of connections. So connection with the self, connection with the world, connection with spirit, and connection with the others.
Yeah.
Say a little bit about that. These are all kind of integrated by our parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, and when we are anchored in ventral, when we're feeling that sense of safe enough to be here, those four pathways to self, others, the world, and spirit are open and accessible and inviting us to explore. And when we move out of ventral into a survival response, those pathways become disrupted, right? They're still there, but they're disrupted. And so we know when we're in a survival response that my sense of self inside, or my connection to others, my connection to the world around me change, and often my connection to spirit, goes away. So we have those four pathways, and each of us are more comfortable in some than others. Sometimes some are accessible and others aren't. And I know for me, the connection to spirit is the pathway that I seem to be on a continual exploration of. I'm more comfortable connecting to self. I've done a lot of work on that, connecting with others, sort of my life's work, connecting to the world around me. Yes, but connection to spirit has been sort of elusive. And so I'm always curious about that. So if I rank my pathways, the connection to spirit is the one that I don't grab onto when I'm in need, because it's not as solid for me. But when I'm regulated, it's the one I want to explore.
In Eastern wisdom traditions, the non-dual traditions like Vedanta, spirit is the self without a story. That's it. Spirit is awareness of awareness, period. And it's ultimately the field of possibility, which is not edited by preconceived cognitive and perceptual restraints that come about as a result of past stories.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That just landed inside me. I thank you. That's lovely. I'm gonna play with that.
What do you think people will get after reading this book? Because I was reinforced in my notion that which I know to some extent from my background and having written 3 books with a geneticist, that less than 5% of disease-related gene mutations are fully penetrant. The rest are basically a result of how we live our lives: sleep, stress management, emotional resilience, relationships, food, biological rhythms, and ultimately self-awareness. So I've always believed that our nervous system, actually, both sympathetic and parasympathetic, work together to bring about homeostasis. But right now, the world is on sympathetic overdrive, and we see every single consequence of that, from mild depression to severe anxiety to guilt, shame, humiliation, to suicidal ideation, but on a bigger level: war, terrorism, unsustainable planet, climate change, I think is all a result of lack of integration of our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So what is the ultimate promise of Anchored, How to Befriend Your Nervous System using polyvagal theory?
Well, to get very big in the ultimate promise, I truly believe that yes, we are in a place where we have great groups of people who are sympathetically dysregulated in big fight or even in flight. And then we have another large group of people who have gone to dorsal despair, hopelessness. And neither one of these are ever going to help us come to the place where we can have the courageous conversations we need to have. Those can only happen from ventral. And so some days, I feel inspired and I think, I can work with this system, big system, organization, and begin to affect change. And other days, I'll turn on the news and I'll feel that pull to dorsal hopelessness, helplessness. And then I come back to the place where I know if I can regulate my nervous system and I walk through the world from that regulated place, my nervous system is going to send that out into the world to every nervous system that I come in contact with. And those other nervous systems are going to hear that message of welcome and that safety, that invitation to come into safe connection. And so, I joke, but I don't think it's really a joke. I think we begin to change the world by working with our own nervous system. And then we change the world one nervous system at a time. And so for the book, my hope is that, people will begin to befriend their nervous system, get to know what happens inside our own system so that I can find my way to ventral. And I think our nervous system inherently knows how to do that. We have to uncover the pathways that already exist inside us. And so find our way home to ventral, and then we communicate that to the people around us. And that's how I think it can begin to happen.
These days, with all the new technologies, Zoom, in fact, yoga classes online and breathing exercises online, and all the even chanting and toning online, you think it's possible for us to collectively integrate our nervous systems so we create coherence in the world out there for a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world. We could do that, a group coherence, because, when you look at how to define the mind, very few people can even define the mind. And recently, We've had lots of discussion about this, and the UCLA neuropsychiatrist Dan Siegel talks about the mind as being both embodied and relational as a process that regulates the nervous system in an ecosystem of relationships.
Right.
So, the mind is not by itself. It's a relational process. Now we have a global brain called the internet, and we have all these technologies. Maybe there is hope for creating a critical mass of ventral.
I do believe that. And I think, we are connected nervous system to nervous system around the globe, right? My nervous system is connected to yours is connected to, and if we follow that out, every nervous system is in conversation somehow. And I do think that when we're in a group of people, whether it's online or, hopefully someday again in person, right? And we can come to a place where ventral is the energy in the room, and we can all anchor there for a moment. It's something very special. I'm sure you feel it in when you're chanting in a group, or you're, those sorts of things. But
singing,
gospel
music, things like that in churches.
Yes.
Right.
And so, for me, because my work mostly is with, is with trauma survivors, to have something within reach, we are just going to sit here together, joined nervous system to nervous system. You don't have to do anything. And there's something profound that begins to happen, right? And if you get enough people together doing that, you don't have to dance, sing, play, anything, nothing. We're just going to be together, and we're going to feel that connection. And you can feel it begin to ripple out into the world. I have a great image that, the ripples that go out, or, that the sound waves or something, but you can feel it. It's a lovely thing. And I don't know what your nervous system is doing, but my nervous system, we met just a while ago here online. My nervous system feels like I have begun to form a friendship.
Yeah. And then as people listen to this conversation, then it becomes an ecosystem that's stimulating together an integrated response from our nervous systems.
Right. Yeah.
It's been a very enjoyable conversation. My very special guest has been Deb Dana. The book is Anchored: How to Befriend Your Nervous System Using Polyvagal Theory. Thank you so much for joining me, Deb.
Thank you. It's been a joy.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, comment, and share. You can also visit deepakchopra.com for upcoming events, news, and books.